Good morning, everyone. My name is Valérie Faudon. I'm the Executive Director for the French Nuclear Energy Society, and I'm very honored to be your host this morning at WNE for a very special session on small modular reactors. I'm very happy to welcome on stage a group of highly distinguished speakers, Mr. William Magwood, Director General for OECD Nuclear Energy Agency, Mr. Brent Warner, Head of the Power Sector Unit, World Energy Outlook International Energy Agency, Mr. Michal Chudakov, Deputy Director General and Head of the Department of Nuclear Energy from the International Atomic Energy Agency, Mr. Jean-Bernard Lévy, Chairman and CEO of EDF, Mr. Alexei Likachev, Director General of Rosatom State Atomic Energy Corporation, and Mr. Jan Panek, Director, Nuclear Energy and Safety for the European Commission, DG Energy. We will also welcome through video Mrs. Kathy Huff, Acting Assistant Secretary and Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Nuclear Energy of the United States. As mentioned this morning, we are going to talk about SMRs. The IAEA usually defines small modular reactors, SMRs, as reactors producing up to 300 megawatt. There's a lot of interest today in SMRs for various expected benefits, such as enhanced safety resulting from passive safety features or reduced upfront capital investment. According to a July 2020 report from IAEA, there are currently more than 70 different SMR designs under development worldwide. They come in different sizes. Some of them have a capacity of a few hundred megawatts, others just a few megawatts. Some of them are buried into the ground, others are floating on boats or intended to travel in spacecrafts. Some of them will produce low-carbon electricity, but others will address the needs for district heating, produce low-carbon hydrogen or synthetic fuels, and some of them will be based on light water reactor designs, others will be fast reactors. So my first question to Mr. Magwood from OECD NEA. So during COP26 in Glasgow, OECD NEA gave a preview of a new study showing the potential contribution of nuclear in reaching carbon neutrality from long-term operations of the existing fleet, and also SMRs. So can you tell us more about what can be the contribution of SMRs to reaching our net zero goals? Whatever you want. You may stay here.
With the mask off. I want to make sure I follow the rules. So, first, let me thank you for the opportunity to appear with this very impressive panel. It's good to see all of you in 3 dimensions for a change, as opposed to on video. And it's a pleasure to see all of you here in person. So it's truly the first large conference in Paris I've been to since the plague began. So it's a good thing started. Let me start by first indicating that I think we've all watched very closely the conduct and the results of the discussions at COP26 in Glasgow. And while I think some people have walked away from this event with maybe not the enthusiasm that the organizers had hoped for, from my perspective, it was extremely important. And I believe that there were 2 things that came out of Glasgow that perhaps weren't in the newspapers, but were very important. One thing, most important, is I think that many of the policymakers and many of the members of the public who were watching Glasgow very closely, maybe for the first time started to realize how incredibly difficult that the task of decarbonization will be. I think that this discussion about net zero by 2050 had been seen by many people as a very important objective, but really didn't give a lot of thought to how hard it was going to be. We're not talking about minor changes and minor tweaks in how we do things. We're talking about a major revolution in the way we live, in the way we work, in our industries, and in everyday lives. This revolution is going to be, if we are successful, will be a dramatic change. And people, I think, started to absorb that. Now, also in the aftermath of Glasgow, as I've talked to people in different countries, I've found that there's a certain dash of reality that's coming into the conversation, particularly as we focus on 2030. And that dash of reality has pushed many people to ask the question, well, how are we going to really do this? How are we going to be successful? And what tools do we need? And among the tools that people are now beginning to talk about more than they did, say, 2 years ago, is nuclear energy. But for nuclear energy to be successful, it isn't going to be just business as usual. We're going to have a revolution in nuclear energy as well. And that's where this topic today comes into play, small modular reactors. Now, as Valerie mentioned in her opening comments, small modular reactors isn't just simply reactors that are just smaller than they used to be. They're really completely different technologies. Many of these reactors, in fact, most of the reactors that are in this conversation about small modular reactors are actually Gen 4 systems. We had, a few years ago, a Clean Energy Ministerial. And during the ministerial, we had the meeting of the Generation 4 International Forum. And the Generation 4 International Forum, by the way, has a very nice booth out there. Please visit the booth. Met with members of the industry to talk about their small reactors. And there were probably 20 or so representatives from industry in this meeting. And when we asked them all to stand up, they all stood up, and we said, all of those who are working on a light water technology sit down. One person sat down. All the rest are working on Gen 4 systems. So this is an indication that the future is with these advanced technologies. And more importantly, the analysis that we've done of the various scenarios that the IPCC has been looking at, as you know, they've looked at about 90 different scenarios. Our analysis has shown that that if you average what these scenarios say about what the future of nuclear should be, they say that nuclear needs to be, by 2050, on average, a total capacity of 1,160 gigawatts, compared to about 400 today. So that shows you what needs to happen. If this is going to be done, it isn't going to be just for the electricity sector. It's going to be Gen 4 systems that are dealing with the hard-to-abate areas, particularly areas like process heat for industry, perhaps even merchant shipping, something that we used to talk about a long time ago, but maybe that's coming back. Many of these areas, and also hydrogen production. You know, we hear a lot about hydrogen these days, but hydrogen is going to be a much more complex subject than most people think. As the NEA has looked at these issues, we have been working on a report that is the result of the work of international experts around the world that's known as the Advanced Reactors and Future Energy Market Needs. This report will be released in the next few months, and it'll address non-electric applications like nuclear heat, desalinization, hydrogen production, and many other uses. These reactors are going to provide a new way for nuclear to contribute, not just electricity, but really across the board. And that is part of the story, I think, of Glasgow. If we're really going to make a change, we're going to have to see these technologies solve problems across all industries, not just in the electricity sector. As you heard from Valerie's comments, there are about 70 different projects around the world, but they're not all going to be successful. Only a few will be successful, and we need to see that evolution process take place relatively quickly, because the technologies that are available by 2030 or 2035 are going to be the technologies that will matter. What beyond that, I think it will be for the long-term future, but for 2050, if we don't have the technology by 2030, it won't matter. So it's a call to industry. It's a call for the academic community. It's a call for the laboratories. Let's work together and make this a success, because if we don't have these technologies within the next decade, it'll be too late. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today. This is a very important discussion, but the real work is being done in the laboratories and industries around the world to bring these technologies to market as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Warner, so IEA has released a net zero report, a net zero scenario report before Glasgow. So can you tell us what is the contribution of nuclear in this report to reach net zero? And also, have you started looking at non-electrical application? And finally, Mr. Birol said that the wind is changing from nuclear and then new countries are reconsidering nuclear. So can you tell us a little bit more about this? Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie, and thank you also to the distinguished panel and everyone here this morning for this discussion. So I think, as mentioned, Dr. Birol, our Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, on Tuesday, talked about the fact that nuclear is set to make a comeback. And I think this is a very clear message for the industry, but it is on the condition of delivering projects, delivering the new technologies on time and on budget. And I think that's a very key component and a key task ahead. So I think there are elements within the plan going forward. So the net zero by 2050 scenario that we released in May of last year was very much focused on really just applying for the energy sector at large, what it would take to actually move from where we are today, where we need to be in 2030, and where we need to be in 2050 to actually achieve net zero emissions by 2050. And that means that every low emissions technology needs to play a role. Electricity is at the heart of the transition. It's the first sector to actually reach net zero emissions, reaching that in 2040 in the roadmap, well ahead of other sectors, even though today it's the largest emitting sector. And nuclear power has a central role there. It remains a significant portion of electricity generation. Today it's about 10% of generation in the net zero roadmap. It remains at that level, but that takes serious growth. That means a doubling of nuclear capacity at the world level. So offsetting retirements, building new power plants, large and small. And I think also what we think about in terms of construction, that means really a second wave, large wave of nuclear construction with a peak of about 30 gigawatts per year in the early 2030s as we look to accelerate on the electrification side. So what role then do SMRs have in this? I think the answer is very large, but we are watching very carefully how the technology progresses, how the costs develop. As we move forward, I think there are many interested parties and countries around the world watching exactly how this will play out. One of the ways to think about it is how large is the prize for low emission technologies as we move forward? If we think about the level of investment that we would need in the 2030s, for example, in the net zero by 2050 scenario, in low emission technologies in electricity alone, we're talking about an average of $1.4 trillion per year of investment. That's more than 4 times what we're spending now. And that's a huge prize for any technology that is commercial, proven, and cost-effective in the early 2030s. If it's available at that point, there is a massive market that will be available around the world, many countries, particularly developing economies as they look to transition and phase down coal and moving towards renewable energy, towards low-emission technologies, including nuclear power, carbon capture technologies, ammonia, hydrogen. The need is so large that all of these technologies have a very important role to play. So it's not a matter of either or, it's a matter of competing. And I think that's going to be very key, that in the planning, that those technologies are there and available, and that governments have confidence to put the support as well for the deployment. But of course, that means over the next decade, the industry has a lot to prove. Also, governments have a role to drive through this innovation phase. As we bring those technologies to commercialization, it will be very critical, this early stage of development, to be ready. The race has already started, but we know that also the 2030s will be really the length and the breadth of the marathon, if you like. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shudakov, so obviously safety, nuclear safety, security and safeguards are very important issues regarding SMRs. In your opinion, what are the primary challenges and opportunities regarding the development and the deployment of SMRs? And in what way IAEA supporting the member states in developing SMRs?
Thank you, Valerie, and thanks for inviting me to participate in this honorable session. It's just very famous speakers. And as concerned that SMRs, you mentioned already that according to our publication, we have more than 70 SMRs design, concept design in 18 countries. But in reality, we have in metal 2. One in Russia, one in China, and one under construction in Argentina. There are others also under construction, at the starting construction, but mainly all of them are concepts, just conceptual design and very far from real implementation. So just many member states are asking about the SMRs, and that we have more than 40 member states who is requesting on SMRs, and who is half of them are vendors, and half of them would like to have SMRs on their energy mix in the future, especially that islands, when we have a lot of islands, Indonesia, Malaysia, and other countries and isolated territory. We have requests from Brazil, from Jordan, from other countries that let us to estimate that applicability SMRs on their territory and the economical effect. So just based on this request, our Director General Grossi created that asked us to create energy-wide platform on SMRs and their application. It's like a new program. And the goal of this program, harmonize and coordinate activities inside of agency, inside of different section, divisions, because everybody's doing something on SMRs, but there is no consistency still. And under our Department of Nuclear Energy, we have now this platform that the role coordinate activity to get all informations, what we are doing to create a portal, networking portal, and like one-stop shop for our member states. They can apply through us to see what we are doing. Also, that just get all requests from member states and matching this information to find the gaps and to create that coordinated way ahead. Create a framework how we can help to our member states to develop that SMRs in the nearest future. But really, in reality, that of course we are working with the international organization, with Margaret Bill, and with other international organizations talking about SMRs on the COP26. But in reality, of course, if you ask me about the what are the biggest obstacles on creating SMRs, I must say that we can see it's like actually the lack of harmonization between the national regulatory bodies. So they should do something and should change their approach to the SMRs. The SMRs is not the same as the big commercial reactor, 1,000 megawatt and 1,600 megawatts electrical. And especially it's applicable for the transportable SMRs. So if you are bringing SMR, transportable SMRs, modular SMRs on one island and then taking in several years it's back together with the fuel, why we need to ask this country also generate the full-scale capacity building and full-scale that integrated infrastructure, that it will be too burden. And of course, we are not asking just to decrease the level of safety, security, and non-proliferation. These goals should be, of course, on the highest level, but to reach it, it should be changeable, the way how that they are doing it, how they recognize, how the regulatory body, national regulatory body can assess the specific designs, like in aircraft industry, just to assess it and to recognize that it's applicable to use it in any part of the world. That's the main, but this is very difficult because every national regulators have their own rules. And one of our goals in this platform also to put industry together on one round table with the regulators and to find the way that how they can expedite. Otherwise, we're already losing this battle. We are talking about SMR already 10 years. And Fatigue Birol mentioned that in order to fulfill obligation and net zero by 2050, we need, as I remember that he mentioned, almost 900 gigawatt adding every year that the clean energy. And what it means that nuclear power, if you would like to stay at least 10%, it should be 90 big nuclear power plants, 1 gigawatt each to construct every year. We are not doing it. We are far from it. We are already losing the bet. And here the main obstacles we see even not public acceptance, not that we don't know the market, don't know the economical effects for the SMRs, but as I mentioned, this is a lack of harmonization between the different national regulatory bodies. So we need to work, and of course, just achieving the same quality of safety, security, and non-proliferation, but drastically change the approach to the SMRs if you would like to have this development for the future. And this is one of our role to help our member states to expedite and to early development and deployment of SMRs. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shudakov. So, Yes, Mr. Levy. So EDF is currently building 2 EPRs in the UK and preparing a project for 2 additional EPRs in the UK, and of course preparing for a major industrial program in France for 6 EPRs. So what is the role of the SMR into the EDF portfolio?
Thank you, Valerie. Good morning to everybody, and I'm really very happy to participate in that very high-level panel. For us, SMR is an exciting challenge, and we are going to be part of it at EDF. It's exciting because we are going to have a new and easier construction rules, and modular constructions will bring a lot. It will be easier to build. It will be easier to operate. Passive safety will bring a lot. And as it was already said, there will be other applications than just the traditional one of feeding the electricity grid. And especially with heat and with the benefits to the hydrogen technical or value chain. So it's very exciting. But it's a challenge, or it's many challenges. First, do we have a product? Maybe we have 70 products. That's a lot. At least we have a product, or we will have a product. And we need to demonstrate that there is a market for this product. Now, we are really sure that there is a market for the product, and that's why we have selected a range of capacity, of power capacity, 300 to 400 megawatts, which is where we believe is the maximum of existing coal units. And we want to, get rid of, we want to end up before 2050 or in 2050 at the latest everywhere in the world, or maybe with almost no coal units left. So we believe the challenge of market for a product is probably very close to what we should expect. Then do we have a competitive product? We haven't made the demonstrations. We in the industry, we have not today made the demonstrations that it is price effective to lower the scale. Usually in industry, it is not price effective to lower the scale. So on paper, it looks nice, but we have to demonstrate it. And then to demonstrate that it is price effective and that there will be a supply of small modular reactors for what we believe will be a huge demand, especially for replacement of coal-based power units. We strongly believe, and I really would like to thank Mr. Shudakov for what he just said, and I saw also my friend Alexei Likachev nodding. We all agree it's absolutely mandatory that we have international safety standards. In the airplane industry, there is mutual recognition between a few of the safety agencies. And so once you are certified in the people that have mutually recognized that the safety standards are met, then you can fly roughly all over the world. It's not the case. Our industry was built at a time where the globalization was so far from what it is today that we could maybe afford in the nuclear industry to have national regulations, and that's it. And the core regulation that has been started by IEA is a good start, but it is not sufficient. So to meet this challenge, we really need to look at what other safety-based applications have done and try to reach the same level of standardization and mutual recognition. And then my third point, it's an exciting challenge, and EDF is going to be part of it. EDF is going to be part of it because we need a range of products to address the market. We need small modular reactors, just as we also need very powerful reactors in places like France and the UK and India and many others where the population is huge and the demand for low-carbon electricity is huge. And I'm happy hearing the numbers that the international agencies are sharing with us today. And there is also a very large market for powerful reactors. But there will be sufficient needs for all of them. At EDF, we want to be part of this. We have launched NEWAD a couple of years ago, maybe now 3 years ago, in Vienna, by the way, with our French partners. And we will have partnerships with other allies in other countries than France, and especially in Europe. So we will be there. There is a huge support from the French government. When President Macron, a couple of months ago, said, what are the key technology challenges for the country by 2030? SMR was the number one of the 10 he listed. The number one of the 10 he listed. So we are having French government support. And I'm also pleased to announce that we are going to create an advisory board, which we call INAB, International NEWAD Advisory Board, so that we listen to experts from many other countries than ours, from many other institutions than EDF, so that we will also have the ability to make our decisions, the selection of technical decisions that we will have to make, be challenged by outside experts. So I'm happy to say that we will be very open to whatever will come from the outside world towards our product. So it's an exciting challenge, and EDF is part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Levy. So we're going to travel to the United States to listen to Mrs. Kathy Huff. While we're listening to Mrs. Huff, I would like to remind you that you will need a helmet for the translation as we move on into the panel discussion. So thank you. So let's launch the video.
Hi, I'm Katie Huff, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Energy in the U.S. Department of Energy. I want to thank WNE for inviting me to speak to you today to talk about what the United States is doing to accelerate deployment of advanced nuclear technologies to achieve net zero. This fourth edition of the World Nuclear Exhibition follows on the historic achievements of COP26 in Glasgow, where we saw both global leaders and stakeholders asserting that nuclear energy must play an important role in solving our climate challenges. Dr. Fatih Birol of the International Energy Agency could not have been clearer in his statements at COP26 when he said keeping existing nuclear power plants operating is one of the cheapest sources of clean energy generation, and that nuclear must double if we are to reach our climate goals. As we strive to achieve a 50% or more reduction in our carbon emissions by the end of the decade and a net zero economy by 2050, people who care about the planet must ensure a central role for nuclear energy. The Biden administration shares this view and is committed to supporting both our existing reactor fleet, which currently provides more than half of our clean electricity, and working towards the deployment of advanced reactors. On November 15th, President Biden signed into law the historic Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Deal or Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which represents the largest effort to combat climate change in America's history. The measure includes $6 billion for credits to ensure existing nuclear facilities are able to keep operating in the United States. This support mechanism will keep as many of our existing reactors online as possible to generate as much clean energy as they can. But the bipartisan infrastructure deal will also provide $2.5 billion to fully appropriate the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program demonstration reactors. And that will facilitate the deployment of these clean technologies with 2 first-of-a-kind reactor deployments. And as Secretary Granholm likes to say, we do need to deploy, deploy, deploy. At the Department of Energy, we are shifting our nuclear energy research, development, and demonstration really into hyperdrive, and we're working with numerous developers to deploy those technologies this decade. As we look beyond the United States, lots of countries are including nuclear energy as a key component of their climate plans, and we have a lot of US companies that are collaborating with international partners on new technology development. At COP26, the US joined Romania in its announcement of the decision to deploy US small modular reactors in Romania. This project will create clean energy jobs in both countries. And by deploying this first-of-a-kind clean energy technology, Romania is also advancing climate action in Europe. Domestically, DOE is working to support the deployment of SMRs through a partnership with NuScale Power and the Utah Associated Municipal Power Systems to commercially deploy that NuScale reactor here in the US in the state of Idaho. We're also, of course, supporting the demonstration of next generation advanced reactor technologies to be operational this decade through X-Energy's small modular high temperature gas reactor and TerraPower's Natrium sodium cooled fast reactor. That Natrium device actually will be deployed at a retiring coal plant site in Wyoming by 2028. The benefits of this deployment model are huge. Small modular reactors and other advanced reactor technologies have the ability to take advantage of that existing infrastructure and workforce at these retiring facilities and reduce their construction costs and keep jobs for the communities. I believe that small modular reactors and other advanced reactors will continue to build interest both domestically and internationally. This comes from their ability to not only supply energy for electrical generation, but also to support combined heat and power applications like district heating, desalination, and hydrogen production, thus helping us to decarbonize our industrial and manufacturing sectors. These new advanced designs will enable renewable power by being flexible, and they'll also enable reliable power generation for off-grid communities or remote communities. Recent developments in nuclear-derived hydrogen are especially exciting to me. And just last month, DOE announced its support to demonstrate the production of clean hydrogen using nuclear power at Palo Verde Generating Station in Phoenix, Arizona. And in addition to support for the existing fleet and advanced reactor designs, that bipartisan infrastructure law will support the establishment of regional hydrogen hubs in the US that could use advanced nuclear technology to provide clean hydrogen to a wider customer base. All of this is good news for the global future of nuclear energy, and most of all, for our planet. So we must work hard to demonstrate that the promise of advanced nuclear energy becomes a reality. And we are working with the greatest efficiency to bring these new advanced reactors online, on time, and on budget. So this includes supporting robust university education programs that are required if we're going to supply the needed diverse population of engineers and other professionals they are going to be greatly in demand as the use of nuclear energy expands around the world. So we have to provide them, just like any other part of the supply chain. Our efforts are going to benefit from international partnerships with the International Atomic Energy Agency, the International Energy Agency, the OECD, Nuclear Energy Agency, the International Framework for Nuclear Energy Cooperation, the Clean Energy Ministerial's Nice Future Initiative, and lots of other multilateral and bilateral efforts. I expect the momentum for nuclear energy is going to grow as the world sees everything that nuclear can bring to the table. And so I'll just leave you with the notion that we must deploy, 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 and get to work. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Huff. So my next question is for Mr. Likachev. Actually, we talked about it. The academic Lomonosov has begun commercial operations in the Russian Arctic city of Pevek in May 2020. So can you tell us more about this reactor and your return on experience in the conception, the construction, and now the operation of a reactor? And of course, what are the next steps now?
Thank you very much. To take the phones, because if you don't mind, I will speak Russian. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this question. I will answer this question, of course, but I would first like to say just a few words, just to make a few conclusions. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this event, of this panel discussion. Indeed, for the first time in a few years, we have got together not online, but in person. So, Mr. Levy, I would like to congratulate you warmly on this event. You are the main organizer of this forum, of this conference. In Russian, we have an expression, we say a festival for the soul. So this forum has really been a true festival, a true festival for the soul. I would like to also say a few words regarding the conclusions made by the previous speakers. Valerie, I think this is a rare occasion when the Russian delegation fully supports the main conclusions of the American delegation. It doesn't happen often, but here we are. And I fully agree with the speaker who represented the US, and I strongly support her suggestions. Another idea that we need to consider all changes in the landscape of the industry, of nuclear industry, carefully, including the application of the SMR technologies. Of course, you can't take things easily. You have to take things seriously in the nuclear energy in our industry. So anything that has to be, anything that is revolutionary, everything that is a major change requires a lot of consideration. And in this respect, of course, decisions regarding SMRs have different aspects. Of course, there are benefits. Such technologies are mobile. The total cost of such an object, of such a site, is also reduced, and you can use such technologies in remote areas, and you can target their use. And another thing is that you can use such reactors to perfect the latest technologies, the state-of-the-art technologies, such as the fourth generation reactors, for example. This is why SMRs should be on the agenda. But there are also some challenges to do with the economy, with distributed costs on a unit of power, for example, the lack of a big range, the lack of large-scale experience of application of this technology globally. So, of course, we don't know what the future what the future holds for us, and we don't know what the landscape of the nuclear industry is going to look like in 2040, for example. But we understand that the share of small and medium modular reactors should increase with time. Going back to your question on the floating NPP, on academic Lomonosov, in a few years we're going to celebrate the 2 years since it supplied first electricity, since it started feeding the electricity grid of Pevek. This is an Arctic city, as you've said. It is the northernmost nuclear power plant in the world. It consists of two reactors. And they have a combined capacity of 70 megawatts, and we see it as an archetype, as a harbinger of future reactors, because we have already developed a new module now based on Ritem 200 reactors, which allows to increase the capacity of one power unit to 110 megawatts. I would like to note that we use such units on nuclear icebreakers, and Ritem 200 has already been used and has shown itself, has proved to be very effective. We have already got a request for 4 more floating NPPs in order to support a Kazakh project implemented in the north of Russia at the Baim deposit of copper. So you know that Kazakhstan has a lot of mineral resources and is involved in close partnership with Russia. Kazakh investors have opted for supplying this particular deposit, this particular mining site, with the help of such floating NPPs. Another thing is that Rosatom is currently developing reactors, mini reactors, we can say, with a capacity of 6 to 8 megawatts, and we're currently developing concepts of reactors similar to the ones mentioned by Mr. Levy. One of them is called Brest 300. It has a capacity of 300 megawatts. It is based on fast neurons, and it is neutrons. And it is being constructed at the moment. It is a 4th generation reactor, and we're also constructing a module for fabrication and refabrication of fuel. So we're trying to create a closed cycle. We're trying to create a whole complex on site which will be based on a closed cycle. And we're hoping that in the next few years we will be able to demonstrate how such a closed cycle can work. And also we will use such a new reactor with a capacity of 300 megawatts. It's very important to implement such projects in partnership with international partners. Under supervision of international organizations, obviously the NEA, of the OECD, and IAEA. They visit us quite often in Seversk, where these projects are being implemented, and I am happy to invite you to visit us, to visit these sites and to see for yourself how it is being implemented. And to to see for yourself what is needed to close this cycle. There is another interesting aspect. I will give you just a few figures. Regarding the use of academic Lomonosov in the Arctic Circle. Of course, it's a very sensitive area. Any impact on the environment is very visible and can be sometimes even irreversible. Since the commissioning of the FNPP, it has produced over 270 million kilowatt hour of electricity, and this has allowed to avoid the emissions of over 300 tons of CO2 equivalent. We have managed to also reduce the ash emissions, and no discharge of waste has been done in the water, and therefore the flora and the fauna of the area has improved since then. One particular sign is that seals and other animals have come back to this area, to this bay. And I think this is a very important sign. This is very telling. This is something that you can't measure with money. I think our partners from the US have said it before. A green transition, decarbonization are simply impossible without the use of nuclear power, without relying on our industry. And I would like to thank all the participants of this conference. I would like to thank the organizers for reviving the forum and for giving it another impulse, for promoting it as a green, as a clean source of energy. What's more, it's simply impossible to create a green balance without the nuclear power. Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lukachev. So before we leave the floor to Mr. Panek, I would like to tell you that we will have time for questions, so you may already prepare questions for our speakers. So my question to you, Mr. Panek, so EU Commissioner Kadri Simpson mentioned on Monday that the net zero goals are putting nuclear energy back at the center of a discussion on the energy transition in Europe. So what are the plans for the SMRs and the development of SMRs at the EU level? Can you tell us more about the contribution of the Euratom Research and Training Program, as well as the European SMR Partnership that she mentioned on Monday? Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie, and good morning, everybody. First of all, thanks to the organizers, and I very much join Mr. Ihlachev's thanks to EDF and to all on the French side who have been involved in making sure that this year's WNE happens despite the circumstances. We are all happy to wear the masks and keep all the distancing, etc., just to be able to meet in 3D, as Director General Magwood said. So it's my pleasure to be part of such a distinguished panel to discuss specifically SMRs today. I'm very glad that you mentioned Kadri Simpson's, Commissioner Simpson's speech on Tuesday. She indeed made references to the developments in Glasgow and to the trends in perception of nuclear that the preceding speakers have mentioned. She also stated very clearly that we want to support the development of an SMR partnership in the EU as an action at EU level that should try to perhaps federate the efforts in Europe, bring together the industry, as well as regulators, policymakers, and other stakeholders around a round table to discuss the challenges for SMRs. A bit along the lines that Mr. Khudakov was describing to be happening at the IAEA. And we hope that we would be able to contribute to those processes in Europe through our own in our own way. That obviously comes on top of the support to SMR that already has been taking place through the Euratom Research and Training Program. Funds have been already used, particularly to develop safety aspects of technologies that will be used for SMRs. We have a project, some of you in the audience may be involved in a project called ELSMOR that is already getting financing from the Euratom Research and Training budget. But I think if we want to see SMRs in 3D again, then we need to do a bit more. We need to step up. So the SMR partnership intends to address 5 specific challenges or 5 specific areas where things need to move forward in order for SMRs to become reality by 2030, at least in first cases of deployment. The first one is, the first work stream of the partnership is focused on market analysis, developing business case for SMRs. We have heard from the speakers today, but also throughout the 3 days, how there is a lot of expectation that SMRs will do something more than traditional large-scale nuclear power plants, not just production of electricity. They can actually start getting into the hydrogen economy. They can contribute perhaps to solving the decarbonization of district heating or industrial heat production. But that obviously brings a challenge in the economic sense. We need to understand what that means for the economics of SMRs. Clearly, economics of SMRs will be different, not just because of the size that Mr. Levy was mentioning, but precisely because of the different applications. So that fundamentally changes the business case. And we need to understand very well with the industry and with the policymakers what actually needs to be done in order to make that business case economically sustainable. Second work stream needs to look into licensing. The promise of SMRs will be realized only if SMRs can be deployed fast, not only in the sense of the first ones coming by 2030 and not later, but also in the sense of every single SMR project being able to deploy within a much shorter period than is the case for the large-scale installations. Now, for that, we need streamlined licensing. If we want to have streamlined licensing, and I'm deliberately avoiding the word harmonization for the moment, we need streamlined licensing where the process of the national regulators can go fast enough, whether it's through mutual recognition, whether it's through other principles, that has to be explored. We need to make up our mind in Europe by sitting down with the regulators. It's their national competence in Europe, so it will be them who will be doing the licenses. But how do we actually make sure that without any prejudice to their national responsibilities and without and competencies, and without putting in doubt the utmost focus on safety, we actually end up with a fast licensing process that will allow quick deployment. A third work stream needs to look at financing. It's linked a bit to the first work stream as well, because if economics change, that means that also the financing options for SMRs may be different. How do we actually mobilize private capital so that actually it sees SMRs as bankable projects? And what are the priorities of the institutional financial players to actually come into financing SMRs? Fourth one, on supply chain. I spoke already about the importance of streamlined licensing for realizing the promise of SMRs. The second precondition of SMR success is production in series. That creates a lot of opportunities for businesses that until now may not have been involved in the construction of nuclear. They may be able to actually get involved in production of technologies that will actually be based on series production. And that also offers new opportunities for geographical spread of manufacturing across a continent like Europe. So we need to have a very good look at that. How do we actually construct a supply chain that is truly European and involves the best possible producers of different components from across the EU? Last but not least, research and development. We have heard a lot about Generation 4. I think we need to be clear that if we want to be there by 2030 with the first reactors, they will not be the Generation 4. They will be the more traditional designs. But it's clear that a long-term future for SMRs lies only in innovation and getting out of the Generation 3 plus bubble into Generation 4, perhaps with the experience from projects like Academic Lomonosov that Mr. Likhachev was presenting. So we need a two-tier or a dual-track approach to developing research and development, to promoting and orienting research and development into SMR technologies in Europe. So these 5 work streams are the areas of focus for the SMR partnership. We are now creating the momentum amongst all the stakeholders in order to be able to actually launch the concentrated work in all these work streams by the end of next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Panek. So, Bill, you wanted to make a comment?
Yes, thank you. I'll try to be brief. Just a couple of quick reactions. First, it's really, again, great pleasure to share the stage with all of you. And I wanted to highlight, in reaction to Mr. Levy's comment about the need for regulators to come together, we should talk about this. It's something that we have been talking to regulators about. I think we have a pretty good sense as to where the art of the possible might be. So I look forward to engaging with EDF to talk about that. I also wanted to comment on from my European Commission colleague. Generation 4 is not as far away as you might think. I'm not saying it's right around the corner, but there are substantial products that will be coming to the market in the next 5 years or so that I would describe as Generation 4. So I don't think it's correct to say that these technologies are far into the future. They're coming quite soon. In the report that we're releasing today, Advanced Reactors, I always have to look at the name, we call it ARFM. Advanced Reactors in Future Energy Markets coming out today, I think highlight that these technologies are coming to the market and can impact 2050. So they aren't the far future. The final thing I just wanted to mention is that for all of us to really see success here, it is going to take a coordinated effort from industry, from universities, from international organizations. We have to work together, but we have to recognize at the end of the day, it is about the markets. So the point that you raised earlier, but the business cases, that has to be established. We have to see where the markets are, how these technologies fit in, and where money can be made. Because if there's not a clear market need for them, they won't succeed. So that's a very important aspect. So appreciate the opportunity to make a comment.
Thank you very much. So we will open the floor for questions. Yes? You have a microphone?
Good morning. I have a question for Monsieur Levy. You were on this stage a couple of days ago and you said you wanted to encourage associations to challenge EDF. I'm the president of the French Association Progrès Nucléaire, and I want to ask you, given the potential of liquid-fueled reactor technologies and their potential to reduce the cost of nuclear energy, make nuclear energy competitive with fossil fuels by simplifying and making inherent safety and making technology which is more licensable. Why is EDF not actively working on molten salt reactors?
Thank you.
Thank you. I think you know, as a corporation with a of course a significant focus on R&D, we always have to balance what is part of industrial development and what is part of advanced research and development. And I'm happy that you are raising this question of where we draw the line. And maybe we're not drawing the line at the right, exactly where it should be drawn. Maybe it should be moving a bit there or a bit there. And I think this is, what you are saying is food for thought. It's not something that we consider as being stable. And obviously, at one point in time, we were very much ahead in terms of advanced reactors, and for many reasons. We decided this leapfrog strategy. Well, it was decided that this leapfrog strategy would not be continued. At the same time, at some stages in our history, we were not a company, we were not listed, we didn't have a capital. So I think we have to take into account all this to decide where we draw the line. So I'm happy that you raised the question, because I want you to consider we have an open mind towards these matters.
Thank you. Anyone one of you wants to add something about molten salt, or? No? Okay. Any other question from the audience? Yes, Mr.? Okay, please introduce yourself as well.
Victor Ilgesonis, Rosatom.
Rosatom.
And I would like to address my question to Mr. Chudakov and Mr. Megwood. Can we expect in the nearest future some kind of recommendations for national regulators how to provide the real work to facilitate for corporation the design of SMRs and to develop as fast as possible needed terms of regulations? Thank you.
Mr. Chudakov?
Of course, up to now, we cannot give any recommendations. It's just recommendation to listen industry. And we have just started our SMR platform. And we have that also a SMR regulatory forum where they are working together, all regulators from the world, they're working together, discussing, and they already discussed applicability, confirm applicability, all existing that procedures and guidelines, safety guidelines for the SMR technology. So we actually agreed with it that, as I already mentioned before, that we are not asking to decrease the level of safety, security, and non-proliferation, but to expedite and to find another way how to do it for the new reactors, SMR reactors, and a new approach, to change the approach that they need to every step of the big nuclear power reactors, like it's historically done from the side, from everything, and all license and certificate. That's ideas, but of course, you yourselves, the regulators of world regulators, must listen that industry and to find the way how to harmonize and to reach the level of safety, security, and non-proliferation, but changing your traditional approach as for the big nuclear reactors. And you know that IAEA is not dictating, and all recommendations of IAEA, and this is only recommendation, that we are not in a position to tell that national regulatory body what they must do. This is their inner decision, but they should understand that we are already losing time in order that to fulfill recommendations of COP26 and demand for the new clean energy for the future. And they should be more active and more listen that industry and the public that in their countries and in the world, and to actually not to be obstacles, but to help safely, securely, and with non-proliferation to move ahead with the SMRs. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Would you like to add something? No, I just, and I didn't tell it in detail, but of course that approach and some to the SMR should be different from approach to the big nuclear reactors, and especially it's applicable for the transportable SMR, that when you are bringing it and operate and then taken back. That. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Bill, do you want to answer also the question?
Well, let me. I don't disagree with Mr. Chudakov said. What I would say in addition, though, is maybe two things. First, it's important to recognize, as we've discussed, that these technologies are very different. So there's tremendous hazard in talking about small modular reactors as a group, because the differences between the various designs are dramatic in some cases, and therefore they have to be looked at more or less as individual technologies. Maybe there's some classes we can group, but mostly we have to look at them individually. And I absolutely agree that the national regulators have the ball here. This is not the realm of either the NEA or the IAEA or any other organization. National regulators really have to work together to pave the way for these technologies in the future. And of course, that is the trick, isn't it? How to facilitate that. But one comment I would make, Mr. Likachev highlighted the floating nuclear power plants that Russia is working on. This is a technology which obviously works because it's generating electricity, but it raises very interesting and intriguing institutional, regulatory, legal issues. And the NEA has started the path towards developing an analysis of all these issues, and look forward to working with Rosatom and other interested parties towards a workshop probably late next year to really launch off the major analysis of these areas, because I think this is an area of technology that is becoming interesting to people across the world. We're hearing more vendors developing floating nuclear power plants, and particularly if we end up using marine systems, this is something that takes a lot of thought, and I think we'll probably work with the IAEA on this as well, but this is a very important area to analyze and understand.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. has been asking.
Good morning, my name is Dalibor Matejou. I'm from Czech Republic, from Moravian Silesian Energy Center, and I have a question to speakers concerning of the radioactive wastes, especially about the back part of the fuel cycle. Only Rosatom is involved in it very well, and developing is for small modular reactors and generation 4, and I think that it is very important. It has to be developed in parallel with the small modular reactors and so on. What is your opinion about it?
Yeah, I think the question was about the importance of closing the nuclear fuel cycle and the contribution of SMRs.
Maybe I can just say a few words if I need to reassure you that I do believe that while we are looking at some more short-term targets regarding how we can address the urgency of global warming, and that obviously small modular reactors with, I would say, basically Gen 3 solutions will support, will be what we believe is an essential support to fighting global warming and climate change. At the same time, we need to keep at a very high level of priority the need to close the cycle. So I think we should never oppose that we do have urgent climate priorities, and that we also have to keep in mind that the nuclear solution will need to resolve also the management of its waste, which is only partially resolved by the current technologies. So please don't believe that we oppose the two goals.
Mr. Likachev?
Take the phones, please.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank our friends and colleagues from the Czech Republic for this question. Indeed, we have been actively involved in working on closing the nuclear fuel cycle. And here we are trying to solve three fundamental issues. First, we want to experimentally prove that it is possible, and and here we need to mention our project in Seversk and the Brest reactor. In 2025-27, we are going to prove that this project is industrially completable, implementable. Number two, we have signed an agreement with the EDF. We signed an agreement with the French Nuclear Energy Commission. We signed an agreement on processing MOX fuel in fast reactors, and this achieves us to go to the third level of fuel recycle. So we are going to first perform the first cycle in thermal reactors, then we use MOX fuel during the second cycle, and then we keep on recycling MOX fuel in fast reactors. And that is actually the answer to the question, to the question of the possibility of closing the fuel cycle. And here we can in fact provide enough uranium to cater to all the nuclear energy facilities across the globe. So we will be using the radioactive material that we already extracted and that we have already. We will be able to use radioactive material that that has already been stockpiled and the one that is contained in the spent fuel. And finally, yet another important question is handling red waste. Right now we are performing specific research on red waste, and we are going to be bearing as the lowest amount of radioactive material possible. We are going to have an equal exchange with the nature in that matter. We will be returning back as much uranium as we extracted before. So, once again, three aspects. First, we are going to confirm together with our French partners the possibility, the applicability of this technology. Secondly, we are going to use the uranium that we already extracted. And number three, we are going to minimize the amount of red waste that is buried in the ground.
We have to close the panel today. Thank you very much to all our distinguished speakers, and have a good day today for WNE. Thank you very much.